This time I'm playing with the top leaderboard Grandmaster tank. The competition consists of 6 games. You get 1 point by winning going first, 2 points by winning going second. The player who at the end has the most points, wins the competition. The first game is Lunar mining facility capital Conquest. And my opponent decided to pick this territory as first territory pick, so to probably for it be his capital place and that he would be able to cover all of this right area below him. While I decided to go with this territory, which is my favorite capital territory for the blizzardless version of the map. And sure thing, these were our actual capital spots. My opponent in his turn captured the whole right area below him as I was expecting him to do so. But he actually fell for this map's trap. With it being a very big map, it could be very tempting as the first player to capture a lot of territories, so to highly decrease your opponent's territorial troop bonus and with that being the territorial advantage. But the downside of that is that if your opponent's capital is near, then he could just decide to immediately blitz it and take over it. So this is what I actually did, so I just think that was a mistake for me to additionally crush that 3 troops territory losing 2 troops, as I think my priority should have been to leave more troops on both of my capitals, so my opponent wouldn't have a good chance to retake any of them. But luckily for me, my opponent lost the 79% chance blitz rule and didn't retake the capital, so with that I just captured these continents, and with that the game was completely lost for my opponent. After the first game the result becomes 2-0 with me being in the lead. The second game is simple world capital Conquest. And as the first territory pick I decided to select the territory of the Andean states, so to force my opponent take another South American territory and for it to be my capital spot because one border continents are just OP. Well, actually in Eastern Australia, I selected this territory as well, so my opponent wouldn't trap me in South America. This is how our territory selection looked at the end, and that my opponent wouldn't place any counter-attack army in South America. I decided to place my whole army in Andean states. But actually he didn't place any army there nor in mainland Europe, as what he actually did is split his troops into the 2 armies of Middle East and Southeast Asia, with the latter being his capital spot. And that caught me off guard and I realized that I made a blunder. Though if he didn't capture all of the territories above, I knew that I could potentially make a comeback. So this is why I added all of my newly gotten troops to the territory of Central America. But my opponent obviously crushed it with 86% chance. And with that took over North America, Europe and Asia. And I think my biggest mistake here was to try crushing his secondary army instead of his capital, which would have been 73% chance. So as you can see, I failed breaking through his border. Then he got a very favorable advantage of even losing 8 troops fewer when crushing my non-capital army, and then in the third turn he took over my capital, getting 100% success chance. With him winning the game he equalized the result, which is now 2-2. The third game is Jules Verne's mysterious island world domination. This is how our territory setup looked at the end. I was mostly considering these 2 territories, and at the end I decided to put my army into this one, but unfortunately my opponent put his army exactly next to it, and with him getting an extremely fortunate attacker's advantage of even 10 troops, the game was immediately lost for me. There were just 0 chances for me to win this game, so I immediately surrendered. And after 3 games the result becomes 2-3 with my opponent now being in the lead. The fourth game is Brazil capital Conquest. And as his first territory pick my opponent decided to select the territory of Tocantins, so to probably go for the 6-troop continent, while I decided to pick the territory of Guiz. And at first it looked like that he was selecting the territories to go for the 6-troop continent, but then it looked like he was actually going to place his capital on the territory of Mato Grosso do Sul. But either way, with me putting a secondary army on Rio de Janeiro, I was prepared to counter anything. and with my opponent's army placement I guess he was actually going to put his capital in the Mato Grosso do Sul, but then I think by seeing my secondary army's placement I guess he decided to change his plan of going to the 6-troop continent again with placing his capital on Tocantins. He got the attacker's advantage of 5 troops when crushing my secondary army, which was unfortunate for me but not that bad, as then I've got the attacker's advantage of 4 troops when crushing his 8 troops army, and then before invading him into the 6-troop region, I captured all of the other regions, so he would have to waste a lot of troops to invade them and wouldn't really succeed with his plan to hold the 6-troop continent. My opponent invaded me into all of my continents, but was only left with 2 troops on his capital. But instead of taking over this capital, which might have been the best decision, I decided to go with the same strategy again, and very unfortunately lost 3 troops in a row here just to end up with 2 troops to get next to his continent, but luckily enough the manual roll still went successfully for me. My opponent failed to invade me into 2 of my continents with being left with no troops on both of the capitals, so with that the game was won for me. After 4 games the result becomes 4-3 with me getting back to the lead again. The 5th game is France's capital Conquest, and I decided to select this territory as my first territory to pick, as usually one of the center continent territories are the best for your capital placement. While my opponent selected this territory, as with this blizzard, it only made that continent to have 2 borders to guard. So what I realized is that I have to double check the map to find out what the difference made the blizzards before making my pick, but I thought that even with that, I will still be somehow in a good position, so I didn't decide to change my initial plan to put my capital into that territory. Since my opponent split his troops to 2 armies which were both accessible to me, I was going to crush one of them, whichever will be left with no capital. And this is what I did, getting a very good attacker's advantage of losing 6 troops fewer. So just before capturing some continents so my capital army wouldn't end up being easily blocked, my opponent invaded me through all of them, but then I invaded him into his captured continents as well. Very luckily my opponent only lost 1 troop while crushing my 4 troops army, as I think I might have even blitzed his capital if he had lost more troops. Unfortunately with me failing the 6 versus 3 blitz roll which was 91%, my opponent ended up holding that continent. And then with me needing to invade my opponent into his continents again, I decided to rather trade in a set at 3 cards, as I didn't want to risk of leaving my capital too weak. Fortunately my opponent didn't have a set at 3 cards, so he wasn't able to get the 22 versus 10 capital blitz roll which would have had 86% success chance. So then by seeing that my opponent after trading an A set could decide to instantly blitz my capital, I was avoiding wasting my troops as much as possible. But I had to invade my opponent into both of his continents again. He made a very smart decision to leave 4 troops here, so to make me waste a lot of troops. But very luckily for me I lost no troops when crushing that 4 troops army. But even with that my opponent got 73% chance blitz roll, which fortunately went terribly for him. But honestly I feel that I didn't really deserve this win, but it is what it is. The result becomes 5-3 with me still being in the lead. The 6th game is classic capital Conquest. My opponent selected North Africa as his first territory pick, which is the usual capital place for the first player. And I decided to go for Brazil, as the blizzards made South America to only have 1 border in this game. This is how our territory selection looked at the end. And I decided to split my troops into 2 armies, one putting in South America on Brazil, while another one in Australia on Indonesia. And I decided to go with Brazil, while my opponent decided to place his capital on Siam. Unfortunately for my opponent, he got bad manual rolls here and then lost 76% chance blitz roll to crush my army. He captured North America though, which I invaded, and captured Europe, South America, Africa and Australia for myself, so my opponent would have to waste a lot of troops or let me get a good troop bonus. Though to capture Australia was probably a mistake, as I made it that he could capture it much easier. Anyway, my opponent tried to manual roll my army here but didn't succeed, and I ended up receiving even 15 troops. So then with it still being round 2, I captured North America with Europe. And then with me receiving 18 troops, I've got 100% chance to blitz my opponent's capital in the round 3. I win, and with that the final result becomes 7-3 with me winning the series. Now for more 1v1 competitions click on the playlist on the right, and for more 1v1 strategy tips click on the playlist on the left.